This is class number 2 for cults versus marketing. So today, when I was working with my students, we talked about the paper they have to write, which you don't have to do. But I also wanted to make sure that they were really immersed in the idea of the 1960s and what it felt like to live during that period of time. And the reason why I wanted to do that was because our idea of what cults are, how we think about cults today, are that they are something that end ultimately in a tragedy. And we think about this in terms of Jonestown, we think about this in terms of Waco. And these cults occurred at a particular period of time when there was a tremendous amount of social upheaval and social change. And so when you think about something like 1968, it was the year that Martin Luther King was unalived. It was the year that RFK was unalived. When people saw RFK, it was this amazing thing in a way that we don't necessarily have when we see politicians today. It was also a time of music and protest music. It was a time of student protest. It was time of civil rights. It was the time of women's rights. And so there's all kinds of changes going on and all kinds of upheaval. And so in the midst of this, slightly earlier than 68, in 1964, there was a change in immigration regulations, which allowed for more Asians to come to the United States. And with them came their religious beliefs. So suddenly Americans were exposed to things like Buddhism and Hinduism. And you see also the Beatles start engaging with transcendental meditation and the Maharishi. And so with this influx of new faith systems, with all of this turmoil, with the ability to change your faith, which really wasn't an option before, you start to have young people exploring new belief systems. And some of those turned out to be cults. And last time we watched a documentary about Jonestown, and this time I showed a little bit of a documentary about Waco, and that too is quite traumatizing. What students also didn't know was that Waco was one of the precipitating events that led to Timothy McVeigh blowing up the Murrah building in Oklahoma. But I show these to students not to traumatize them, but for them to understand that it is these really horrifying events that has so solidified the idea of what a cult is into the minds of people who were alive at the time that these events happened. But that definition of cult is very limiting, and in fact has not been the way that people understood cults to be over the course of time. And so I had them read a short piece from the book Religion in 5 Minutes about the difference between religion and cults. And cults, quite simply, are when you venerate a person or an ideology. And this comes out of the 17th century, that's what cults were. They were smaller sects, right? And so then you get into the 19th century, and then it's not just about religion, it can be broader beyond religion. So today's class was really about how do we negotiate the definition of what a cult is. We looked a little bit in terms of the recruitment and retention techniques, but we're going to spend more time on that next week, so I pulled back a little bit on that, at least for now. And we talked about why I specifically decided to use the word cult when writing Hoodwinked. Religious studies scholars don't like to use the word cult. They like to use the word new religious movements. And one of the reasons for that is there's so much tension around the word cult that it is often thought of in terms of if you call something a cult, then you don't have to think about it. It's something you can push aside because those are crazy people that belong to cults. And we know that's not the case. Very, very smart people become part of cults. And of course, I looked at Amanda Montell's idea of cultish. Maybe it isn't cult, maybe it's just kind of cult-like. And I like that idea, but I felt like it just wasn't enough So I rely on the work of John Jalalich to say, you want to talk about an idea with the broadest understanding within the culture. And when you talk about cults, that's what people hear. That's what people know. So you call them cults. And really, nobody outside of the academy knows what new religious movements are. Dr. Lalich has about a dozen things that she talks about that have to do with what are the important elements of a cult. The key things that she talks about that I want to highlight are having a charismatic cult leader who is usually narcissistic and usually male, a transcendent belief system, meaning an overarching worldview and something that is meant to explain everything. The group uses systems of control, meaning that they tell you what to eat, what to sleep, who to have sex with, and so on. And finally, systems of influence. That is surveillance, where one member of the group watches to make sure other members of the group are doing what they're supposed to do. And then, of course, reporting transgressions to the leader. And I think you can already begin to see how these ideas start to play out, not just in terms of religious groups or religious groups that ends in tragedy, but less all-encompassing kinds of groups that you may belong to. One of the things that we ended up talking about in class was various weight loss and fitness brands that have these kinds of qualities. So if you think about something like CrossFit, they're telling you how to exercise. You're supposed to exercise until you throw up or you're not doing it right. You're also supposed to have a paleo diet, right? So it's telling you how to eat. It's telling you how to act. It's telling you how to perform. The same sort of thing with Weight Watchers, and actually we talked about that in terms of the fact that they're now allowing medications to be used. So suddenly the cult isn't really what the cult was before, which has all kinds of interesting ramifications. So next week we'll dig more into the idea of what are the recruitment and retention techniques that cults use. And of course, go buy the book. Go, get it.